Israel is furious with the new conditions set by Iran in the negotiation led by the United States. No final agreement would move forward without pressure for the Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon and without restraint on actions against Hezbollah. On June 18, 2026, this point became one of the most explosive flashpoints of the crisis because it directly affects Israel's security and gives the Iranian regime a political card that it tries to sell as a victory. The memorandum signed between the United States and Iran opened a 60-day window to try to turn a truce into a final agreement, but it also put on the table issues that Israel does not accept as mere diplomatic details. The demand involves Lebanon, Hezbollah, the Israeli military presence in security zones, and the Iranian promise to end attacks only if its allies are preserved. That's where the tension rises. Israel did not participate as a signatory to the agreement, does not want to be bound by a document signed by Washington and Tehran, and sees a direct risk in accepting that a group supported by Iran gains time, momentum, and political protection. The Iranian regime is trying to turn the ceasefire into a shield for its regional proxies, while part of Trump's team is already showing doubts about Tehran's real willingness to make concessions on the nuclear issue. What will Israel do if pressured to back down? Why did Iran put Hezbollah at the center of the agreement? How will Trump sustain a pact that is already being challenged by allies, intelligence, and Congress? I'll tell you all about it in a moment. If you like this kind of straightforward, no-nonsense content, consider subscribing because here we have videos like this every day. The preliminary agreement was presented as an attempt to end the military escalation and reopen navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, but the section involving Lebanon raised alarms in Israel. The document deals with the suspension of military operations on several fronts, including the Lebanese front, and requires respect for Lebanon's sovereignty. In practice, Tehran is trying to use this language to push for the Israeli withdrawal from areas occupied after the clashes with Hezbollah. For Israel, this is not a technical detail. It is a concrete threat because Hezbollah remains an armed force aligned with Iran, stationed near the border and used as a tool of pressure against Israeli cities. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated that the presence of Israeli forces in Lebanon would be a violation of the agreement negotiated with the United States. The message was clear. Tehran wants to include Israel in an agreement that Israel did not sign. This is the maneuver that angered the Israeli government and triggered an immediate political crisis. For the Israeli security establishment, this would mean accepting that the aggressor keeps its structure while the victim has its response limited. The Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz responded by stating that Israeli forces will remain in the security zones in Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza for an indefinite period. The position was a tough response to the outline of the agreement, because Israel believes that leaving these points now would create space for the reorganization of jihadist groups. Katz put the issue in terms of defending Israeli communities, especially those living near the border. The message was simple. Israel will not withdraw soldiers from areas it considers essential to prevent new attacks. Benjamin Netanyahu also tried to distance himself politically from the memorandum. He avoided openly attacking Trump, but made it clear that the decision was made by the United States and that Israel is not part of the agreement. The problem for him is that the negotiation appears to be an attempt by Washington to end the war before Israel considers the task of dismantling the threats from Hezbollah and the Iranian axis to be complete. The reaction inside Israel was not limited to the cabinet. Ministers like Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich criticized the agreement because they believe it does not protect Israeli security. The harshest criticism is that the memorandum favors Iran by turning the Israeli withdrawal into a bargaining chip, while Hezbollah does not actually disarm and the Iranian nuclear program remains surrounded by doubts. For this group, it doesn't make sense for Israel to give up territory gained in military operations if the other side keeps its missiles, its structure, and its direct connection with Tehran. The tension also appeared behind the scenes in the relationship between Netanyahu and Trump. Israeli officials began talking to the United States to try to maintain a military presence in southern Lebanon even after the memorandum was signed. The dispute now is not just about Iran, it's also about who defines Israel's security. Washington wants to preserve the agreement and sell the truce as a diplomatic victory. Israel wants to maintain freedom of action to attack Hezbollah if it detects military movement on the border. This difference puts the two allies on a collision course. Hezbollah took advantage of the moment to demand Israel's complete withdrawal from Lebanon and to try to turn the memorandum into a political victory. The group knows that international pressure on Israel can serve as a temporary shield. That's exactly what worries the Israeli government. A ceasefire that gives Hezbollah time to reorganize positions, recover routes, and rebuild military capability does not mean peace. For Israel, it means postponing the problem and allowing Tehran's armed wing to come back stronger when international pressure decreases. The nuclear issue makes the situation even worse. The memorandum states that Iran reaffirms it will not develop nuclear weapons and that the parties will negotiate the technical terms over the next 60 days. That wording failed to convince U.S. intelligence chiefs. The CIA director, John Ratcliffe, reportedly raised doubts about Iran's real willingness to make deep nuclear concessions. Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth also expressed concern, while Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner argued in favor of continuing to pursue dialogue. The problem is that the Iranian regime says one thing at the negotiating table and another behind the scenes. Information released by American outlets indicates that Iranian officials were discussing the agreement internally in a different way than what they presented to mediators and to the United States. This reinforces the view that Tehran may be using the 60 days to buy time, ease economic pressure, reopen export channels, and preserve its strategic program. Israel looks at this and sees the repetition of an old tactic, diplomatic promises on display, and real resistance behind closed doors. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps also appears as a central obstacle. According to reports, Ahmed Vaid and hardline sectors of the Iranian military structure are reportedly blocking the final agreement, demanding that each clause be approved by the most radical wing. This creates a double negotiation. Diplomats talk to the Americans, but the military ideologues decide whether to accept it or not. The foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, and other negotiators are limited because they cannot act independently when it comes to Israel. This confirms that the real interlocutor is not just the Iranian government, but the military machine linked to regional terrorism. Vaid is said to have accused the negotiation team of being too soft on the Americans. This internal pressure reveals the fragility of the agreement. On the other hand, Trump tries to show that he got Tehran to commit to a truce, the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and nuclear negotiations. On the other hand, the hardline Iranian faction tries to secure money first, preserve Hezbollah, and avoid real concessions in the nuclear program. The numbers don't add up. If Iran demands an Israeli withdrawal, maintains nuclear ambiguity, and still threatens to charge for passage through the Strait of Hormuz after the 60-day window, the agreement becomes a minefield. The economic part of the memorandum also causes distrust. The text talks about rebuilding Iran with a package of up to $300 billion, but the public presentation made it clear that this is not direct money from the American taxpayer. The idea would be to seek regional partners, private investors, and Arab nations willing to finance the reconstruction. The problem is convincing anyone to invest capital in an unstable regime, controlled by military factions and accused of using resources to support militias. The memorandum provides for licenses and authorizations to facilitate Iranian oil exports during the truce and paves the way to discuss the use of frozen funds. The text does not eliminate all doubts about when and how these funds would be released. For critics, this is a serious risk. Iran may receive financial relief before providing firm guarantees on nuclear issues, Hezbollah, and the Strait of Hormuz. For Israel, this would mean financing the adversary while demanding restraint from its own defense. The United States Congress could also block the agreement. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps remains classified as a terrorist organization, and previously approved rules make it difficult to remove this status in the short term. This complicates any agreement that, directly or indirectly, gives benefits to a structure linked to the Iranian regime. Trump may invoke executive powers and national security reasons, but he would face strong political resistance if the agreement appears to ease the situation for a force accused of attacking Americans, Israelis, and allies in the Middle East. The White House tries to argue that the memorandum is a way to control the crisis, reduce the risk of a global depression, and prevent the Strait of Hormuz from continuing to put pressure on oil, inflation, and trade. But Israel sees it differently. For Jerusalem, lowering the price of oil cannot come at the cost of strategic survival on the northern border. An agreement that calms markets but protects Hezbollah becomes a national security problem. Trump is betting that he can turn military pressure into negotiation. The difficulty is that Iran wants to turn negotiation into a breather. The regime arrived weakened, divided, and under pressure, but it still tries to extract concessions before giving up anything irreversible. Israel notices this maneuver and reacts with fury because it knows how this game works. I'm Milson Alves, an international affairs specialist, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community.